but it's about the stuff that you're unaware that you eat and digest. You on the tongue, it feels, oh my God, what a fantastic meal! I'm loving it, right? But it's causing this tiny chronic inflammation. You feel bloated. It's just something that is stressing your body, and you're just not knowing what is causing it.
Burning desire, big ideas, bold action.
So today I have Enej Kuscher on the show, the CEO of New. New is a new testing service here in the Netherlands, testing all kinds of biomarker data for longevity and health in general. I'm actually a customer of New. I've done my blood work today on the show, blood work and genetic work, microbiome. We'll be talking about that some today. This is a really exciting moment, not only for us on the show at Boldly Now, but also for in general medicine, the capacity for us to get our hands on data that was really at one point really difficult to get a hold of. Now we have companies like New coming up, doing new kinds of testing, and then sharing that data with their customers so that they can proactively take action on their health, proactively look forward into their longevity, and really be the captain of their own health ship, or their own health journey or destiny. Enej, welcome to the show.
Pleasure to be here. It's an exciting time. Yeah, indeed, I agree with you very much.
Now you've been in biotech for quite a while, right? It's like a decade plus in biotech companies.
Decades, yeah. Basically, ever since my PhD, I did PhD in molecular biology, and as I was finishing my PhD, working on rapamycins, which were kind of today one of the hottest drugs in longevity. We were researching it up in Cambridge back then for cancer studies. But I was my PhD was on rapamycins. After that, I founded my first biotech company, synthetic biology. Grew that over the many years. Then founded the second company focused on developing drugs for rare metabolic diseases, focusing on mitochondria. And a journey into mitochondrial cell biology and kind of, the diseases associated with mitochondrial failure led me to really deeply understand kind of the processes that, with these children who are born with those mutations actually see very similar but very fast forward process of, kind of organ decline, tissue decline, health decline as we see in aging, because that is largely to do with mitochondria, cell senescence, inflammation, and so on, right? So that really got me very curious, right? Okay, so if we're developing interventions for children who are born with a genetic kind of, condition, but have similar pathologies as we have as we age, can we also do something about the rest of us to kind of prevent that kind of failure of the decline of age, right? So this is actually, this is my fourth company in the space of, a number of decades, but it's the one I'm very passionate about, yeah, because it's really about trying to kind of reestablish that, healthy abilities of cells to repair that the way that they are supposed to, from the get-go. Yeah,
so we've had now genetic testing for about a little bit over a decade, I guess, since 23andMe came to market with that, and then at least in the States we have the microbiome testing. Telomerase stuff is a little bit harder to get to, I guess. It's harder to do. And then, of course, blood work. We've been doing blood work in medicine forever. What was your idea to try to bring all of those testing together in one platform with New? Like, that's not what everybody else is doing. They're kind of taking one piece of this puzzle at a time. Like, how did you come up with that idea? And was it a crazy idea is what I want to know. Is it just crazy to try to do them all at the same time?
Yeah. So, and I think really that is the root cause of where we are still today, is because that is challenging, of course, but we are a complex, interactive, combination of, let's say, biological, environmental, and psychological stuff that influences who and what we are, right? We're not just, a kind of, very superficial take on blood, biomarkers, or we're not all about genes, right? Because you have identical, twins. One is a couch potato that is worrying all the time. The other one is an athlete climbing mountains and eating well. In 30, 40 years time, they have completely different biologies, right? So genetics is just a potential or a blueprint of what the cell can do. And then we have, in addition to, tens of trillions of our own cells, we have hundreds of trillions of bacterial cells, right? Then we have only about 20,000 genes of our own. We have millions of bacterial, viral, archaeal, fungal, and so on genes inside our gut, our mouth, and so on, our skin. So we really are a totality of our, kind of current biology, as in terms of physiology, cellular structure, organs, and so on, our microbiome that we carry along, our physiology, our psychology, our environment, and so on, that comprises who we are. And so that really, in a way, fascinated me, but also frustrated me. I mean, I started this journey, purely, as yourself as well, in a way. It's, I was getting into my 40s. I was starting to see that, I no longer recover as well as I used to in my 20s, right? I can, experience more of the, evening fatigue after a lengthy day, etc. And my gray, my hair is thinning and graying and so on. I was balding for a while. It's just, it's the way you, and that's the kind of one of the myths of today, is that we just accept that as an inevitable part of the aging and decline, right? But I was getting curious, right? So by then, longevity was no longer taboo. We were starting to talk about the hallmarks of aging. We were starting to talk about, that aging is a certain type of deterioration process, right? So when I started to look into what's going on with me, it was just a, kind of a pet project at the start, so our family and friends, from kids to grandparents and everybody else in between. And then, but what we did was what we do today at New is we sequence the genome, the epigenome, the telomeres, the blood biomarkers, the gut microbiome, and so on. But each data comes as as a separate silos of information that is, completely disconnected from the rest of the data. So, for example, if you're seeing that you're experiencing some degree of chronic inflammation in your body, or some metabolic dysbiosis and so on, right? If you just look at one set of data, have no idea what is causing it, right? So you can be giving yourself drugs to bring that inflammation down, but you're just basically muting the symptoms, right? You're not actually addressing the root cause. You're not understanding the drivers, right? And with the drivers, it's also important, when you look at the totality of data, everything that is contributing to that inflammation or to that metabolic or hormonal state, etc. I have to be aware of what's correlated, so it's happening at the same time, what's consequential, so maybe it is caused by certain type of disabilities, etc., or maybe what's causative, right? So what is actually behind the scenes and actually creating the mess, right? So with that, really seeing that it took a person with not just a PhD but decades of experience in mitochondrial drug discovery and synthetic biology and genetics and so on, to start really figuring out with himself what's going on, and then talking to a whole bunch of clinical experts. How is a regular person supposed to get that type of information from a 23andMe genome or something like that, right? So with that, we kind of came to an idea. Let's try to build an engine that is able to decipher and decode that totality, and bring that together in a meaningful way that becomes understandable to the rest of us. So really to democratize that complex science. And what New is trying to do is not just to offer all of those tests and to be able to display all of that data, but to integrate all of that data together, like what affects your mood or anxiety or sleep or liver health or skin function and so on, right? So if I'm thinking about that stuff, I want to know all the stuff that is contributing both on the good and the bad side. And I also want to know hacks and improvements and tweaks that I can do to make that processes as good as is possible, right? So if I'm just seeing data in verticals, it doesn't help me a lot. I need to integrate that and then use all the power of AI, machine learning, and all the clinical evidence of all the scientific literature, of all the public biobanks and so on, to actually bring that meaningfully to how am I supposed to improve my biology, right?
And I think that's the biggest challenge right now. And in many ways, this is still a technology for early adopters. People are really fascinated with this stuff now, and you look at it and you think about it. It's like, well, how do we get to a mass, kind of mass use of these things? And I think you're saying something that's very true. If Noob starts to become some kind of a dashboard, if you will, dashboard for my health, dashboard for my life, then I can make sense out of my own data if I'm in relationship with it. And I think this is a thing that I think from New, I got really for the first time. I did 23andMe, whatever, a decade ago, and I could, oh, good, I don't really have any major, biomarkers for cancer or whatever the things we were looking at that time. And then I put it away. I mean, maybe I did a couple of surveys, but I literally put it away, and I don't think I've gotten any utility out of it. There's never a need for me to do it again. We did it again with New, but there's really a need for me to do my DNA again. My DNA doesn't change. So like as I'm still looking at what you guys are doing, blood work, of course, changes from month to month. Microbiome changes all the time. Our epigenetics and our telomeres are changing all the time. And these now become much more indicative of something I can do something about. And I think that's what's starting to become clear, is that if we can make this switch from, hey, I'd like to get tested and find out what's up with me, or find out what my biological age is, whatever that might mean, and we'll talk about that in a minute, that I can start to sense like, and New is an amazing dashboard. We'll put this up on the screen here and show everybody what it looks like. But it's an amazing dashboard. It's really coolly designed and really gives you access to these things that allows you to see the different areas that you've been tested for, what strengths and weaknesses are, all which seems very, very actionable. But if I start to have a relationship with that over time, then I have a different level of agency with it. And I think that's what's, like, and those of us who have been doing some biohacking and already taking, longevity drugs and stuff like that, we're doing it blind. We're just completely flying blind. We're just hoping and trusting that the stuff that we take is going to make a difference in 5 or 10 years. Obviously, it'd be much better to actually have some kind of, month by month or year by year evidence. So I'm really excited about that. But tell us a little bit about this integration piece. I think I'm still so new to the platform. I don't yet know how, and we can talk about my data here in a minute. I don't yet know how these things interact so much. So the things that are new to me in news testing are the microbiome stuff, the epigenetic stuff, and the telomere link stuff. Like, how do you, obviously microbiome, I know I've got different bacteria in my gut, good ones, bad ones, whatever. Like epigenetics, like how does all this stuff begin to come together? For me, the consumer, obviously you're a PhD, you've been doing this a long time, but how does it come together for me? I think I'm most interested in like what becomes something I can do something about versus just something that's information.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good question. So I could give you a number of different examples, but first of all, maybe to address what you said earlier, I think what you mentioned is very spot on. You start having a relationship with your data, with your with the awareness of how your biology changes through time, right? So in addition to those, purely biological fundamentals that we've been talking about, right? NUI is now working heavy on integrating that with also all the wearable technologies, right? So, of course, we're continuously monitoring stuff like Oura rings or Apple Watches. I've got the continuous glucose monitor all the time. I have a ketone meter that I just blow into every morning, and I can measure my kind of my either ketosis level or whatever once I'm in those parts of metabolic cycling. So you really start seeing how your body you're not only seeing the fundamentals of your current biology and then say, oh, I need to change my diet because I have such and such gut microbes, but actually you're seeing your response in real time, how your certain types of lifestyle interventions based on your data outputs, based on your recommendations, when you see your heart rate variability improving, when you see your deep sleep, REM sleep patterns improving, and so on, you're seeing your stress also from your daily interactivity with your body and data, right? And so again, when you just see your heart rate variability data or your sleep data, well, fine, okay. My deep is short, my REM is scattered, and so on. What am I to do with that? You read online on Google some generic recommendations, right? But if you see actually, well, that connects with these types of kind of aspects of your diet, of your metabolism. This is in your, in terms of your genetics versus gut microbes. This is what you should be doing actually in the evening routine, right? And then you see the measurable outcome, how much that really impacts or not, right? Then that becomes so much more, I would say, connects you to evidence, right? Because again, what we want to avoid is, that on one hand, of course, the placebo effect, but on the other hand side, also that, just jumping from one type to another type of generic advice online, but without actually seeing the evidence how that works. Now, to go back to your question, in terms of how that integration comes together. So let's take maybe just a simple aspect of your neurotransmitters, right? There is so many angles to what makes you anxious, depressed, happy. Maybe it impacts your mood swings. It affects your, sleep patterns and so on, right? So let's connect that to the ability to create, the key hormones related to those pathways: dopamine, serotonin, melatonin, and so on, right?
Yeah.
Those have a large sequence of genes related to, methylation pathways, to synthesis pathways, coming all the way from, the folate, so which is the vitamin B9 metabolism and so on, right? There's a number of genes in there that are known quite strongly in our population to vary on their expression level. So some are actually quite constrained and some are very highly expressed, which means that certain types of genetics can actually process those pathways very effectively and some don't, right? And so in some cases, you can't even process your vitamin B9 properly. So you actually have to have a methylated version, so methylfolate instead of folate, right? But let me try not to complicate the picture too much. There's, in average, about 30% of our population actually has, several mutations in the pathways linked to these, key hormones affecting your, let's say, mood, happiness, and anxiety. Now, on top of that, you have a whole bunch of gut microbes that are, known to produce these types of precursors that are necessary for synthesis of those neurotransmitters. We've been learning so much more, in the last, maybe decade or so about the gut-brain connections. So bacteria, creating both synthesizing direct hormonal precursors as well as synthesizing short-chain fatty acids like butyrate and so on and so forth, which are also part of the neurotransmitter pathways, right? So, and then on top of that, you have your diet, right? So you can be eating the diet that either supports that or doesn't, right? So you can have a phenomenally good genetics, but you can be starving yourself out, or you can have a relatively bad set of cards, but actually you can have a very good lifestyle and diet. So you still can, sort of offset the deficiency in the genes by actually providing it with the right type of environment. You're meditating, you're eating well, and so on. So a lot of those deficiencies are actually avoided, right? So you see that also in terms of, so the genetics is what the cells can do. The gut microbiome is what the bacteria contribute. But then we're seeing it in your blood biomarkers, what is actually happening on the stress levels, on the hormones, on the key, nutrients, and so on and so forth, right? So the totality of that tells us really your state, right? So we can learn about your genetic fundamentals and we can see from your blood, oh, and there's really a deficiency. And we are seeing from your gut microbiome, oh, there's also not a very strong support, right? And then we can actually also get from your feedback that you're inputting in questionnaires and so on in terms of your diet, hey, and maybe you're actually lacking those types of foods or supplements, right? So if you just say, hey, I've got these elevated hormones, or you just tell to your doctor, hey, I've got an anxiety, but that's who I've been for my whole life, right? Well, you don't know much, right? But we've seen just the simplest of things, it sounds ridiculous, but they've done studies where they've looked at, chronically depressed people and, kind of chronically optimistic people. So kind of, clinically diagnosed as chronic depression, and looking at the gut microbiome, and it's just almost a completely different landscape. But there are a couple of microbes that are almost non-existent in the chronically depressed people and are almost always present in the optimistic people. And again, I'm not saying that those those microbes are the key contributors to you being depressed or not. It just means that it's not just you are depressed. It means that your entire let's say both biology and psychology need to be taken into consideration, how we can optimize that and how we can bring that into a balance. So it's not just about going to a psychiatrist and meditating, but it's actually, first you need to take care that your cells have everything they need, right? And once they have everything they need, you may still have psychological stress and you may still need to work on that. So it is biology plus psychology, right? But if the biology is completely screwed up, right, and if we don't provide the right nutrition and the right support, it's really going to be hard to come out of that catch-22 cycle where you continuously fall into that kind of either mood or anxious or depressive cycle. Or take another example for maybe myself, there's I mean, we all know now the importance of vitamin D, for example, right? The vitamin that, it's basically a hormone in reality, right? But it's being synthesized, to some degree by also exposure to sunlight. Okay, that's kind of the simplest way of saying. But there's also a lot of bacteria that make vitamin D, and there is a huge number of genes related to this vitamin D, not just the synthesis, but activation, uptake into cells, and then basically regulation, because vitamin D is actually affecting gene expression. So on all these areas, there are genes that are kind of part of the vitamin D pathway, either making, converting, transporting, or, sensing. My set of genes is on the worst possible side of things in all fronts, on making, on converting, on transporting, on regulating, and so on, right? So I'm like in the, in the lowest 20 percentile of the population. But when you look at my blood, without taking any supplementation, any supplements, my blood is okay on vitamin D level. It's not perfect. It almost cannot be perfect, but it's okay. And why? Because I'm taking good care of myself in my diet. I'm hosting the gut microbes that are very rich in the type of bacteria that are making vitamin D. Because it looks like, once you take good care of yourself, there's some kind of balance in this type of ecosystem that establishes itself. When I'm providing the right nurturing environment to my, microbes, they're providing the right type of stuff back to me, right? So it turns out I have a huge number of bacteria in my gut that are making vitamin D. Plus, I'm being mindful of taking that 10, 15-minute walk outside after lunch and getting a little bit of sun exposure, et cetera, et cetera. I still do supplement with vitamin D because I want to have it optimal, right?
Yeah.
But even if I wash out for a period of time and I kind of go without vitamin D, I do okay. So even if I analyze just the genome, right, I would imagine, oh, that's horrible, right? But I might overdose, with just that information. I don't want to overdose, right? I just want to be right.
Yeah. So we've got these layers. You've got the data, and that shows up. We'll look in the app and just say it shows up in the data. It's like, oh, here's good things, here's bad things. And then there's this kind of synthesis in between. And on the app, you deal with, different areas of the brain, the blood, the different parts of the body. And so you do some synthesis conversation like that. And then eventually we kind of get the sense of what's going on better. Why don't we just jump into my data and take a look at what's there, and I'll pop this up on the screen in the edit later, and we'll just give some people an experience of what it would be like if they had done these tests on New. By the way, the tests are super easy. You get them in the mail. You do the saliva test. You do a stool test. Everybody's done one of those before. Doesn't hurt. It's okay. And then in our case, we're in the Netherlands. A New sent out a nurse to draw blood. Super easy. The whole process from purchasing to getting the data collected to the data showing in the app was very easy and kind of seamless in a way. So I want to congratulate you guys on that. That's you're actually having some customer service that you're having to do. You're not just a technology company. So I think that's fantastic. And then you've got this beautiful app. I mean, it's so unlike in a way a biotech company to actually have a well-designed interface and a well-designed app. I'll pop it up on the screen, but as I'm reading here, it's like the brain, cardiovascular, inflammation, metabolism, bone, and muscle. So there's these big groupings that go across the different tests. And then there's the biological age stuff, which would get more curious to hear your opinion on those biological age numbers. And then I can drill down into each one of those areas, whether it be the blood or the epigenetics or the genetics or the microbiome, and see really different things. Now, there's a lot of data here, and it's if you're interested in this kind of thing, you can really spend a lot of time looking at every single thing that was tested and seeing what the response is. So you can go to a very granular level. But why don't you just take us through some of the things you see in some of the areas, and then we can talk a little bit about how in the app I begin to understand how, what that's communicating for me. And I think that'll give our listeners a really good idea of what they might be able to learn in the app. So you've got my data, right?
I've got your data. And I don't have the interface of your app because, of course, that's only yours.
Yeah, okay.
with your permission and the GDPR, that
Yeah.
we have, I can see the raw data, but I cannot actually walk through the app. So with that said, let me just say, I really appreciate your positive words on the app. We're still doing a huge amount of additional work to the app to make it even more, interactive, even more easy to understand. So in addition to what you're seeing here in these kind of, areas, immediately we want to flag up kind of the most important findings, the most important to-dos, like these are your 5 take-home messages, this is your kind of your key hacks, etc. Because right now, as you said, it's still a little bit like you need to go deeper and understand and learn about it, right? So every single thing that is written there, when you go deep dive into understanding why certain recommendations, whether that is food or activities, or telling you the stories about the genes or the microbes, you see there's a whole bunch of numbers. Those are references. You click on any of those numbers, it takes you directly to the clinical research papers, to all the scientific evidence and so on. So none of that stuff is without evidence behind, right? So we don't try to make up any stuff, but everything is kind of really thoroughly researched, and everything is supported by the scientific literature behind that. So you can really, if you want to see how do these guys know that, well, here's the evidence, right? But we'll still trying to make the app more and more easy, that even on the landing page you get kind of the high level summaries that we'll be talking about right now. So maybe with that said, if we kind of look at high level in terms of just going down into areas like blood, right? You're seeing things related to cholesterol, which tells us that you're currently, or at least at the time being, you've been pushing very heavy into your kind of ketogenic diet and so on, right? Which is great for a certain limited time of metabolic flexibility, right? But the ratio of your ApoB, ApoA1, cholesterols and so on is really kind of pushing it to the upper side of what the livers are feeling happy about, right? So again, while a standard doctor would push you to have statins at your cholesterol and LDL levels, this is not what we're seeing through the app, because your ApoA and ApoB levels, which are kind of the carriers of the HDL and LDL particles, are actually really quite healthy. But you are pushing it, right? So you want to really make sure that you're kind of going into this kind of metabolic flexibility, going from a more well-balanced Mediterranean to eventually keto, do a fast, and then go again maybe to a more balanced diet. Yeah.
And this is a detail that runs in my family. Higher levels of cholesterols and stuff like that. Something I've known about for quite a while, and obviously, as you say, doing a lot of ketogenic diet stuff.
We see that also in the genetics, right? So we see quite a number of genes, again, to that same level. There's a certain number of genes also, jointly called the FTO genes, for example, which are kind of the fat obesity genes, etc. But again, you're not fat, you're not obese, because you are taking good care of yourself. You're being very mindful. So let's say you are genetically predisposed to, you could be obese, but you're not, because you're taking that good care of yourself, right? Then the second part, your blood otherwise is really good. I mean, you're taking great care of your vitamins and your supplements, your nutrition. Most of your we've discussed earlier, with a mutual colleague, we saw that sometimes a supplementation can actually even be excessive, right? So if you exaggerate, you actually can have certain things in your blood that are just too high. That makes your blood really struggle, your liver really struggle, and can actually cause more harm in the long run than good. But you're taking, you're clearly, you've been doing this for a while, so you have a good practice. Most of your levels are actually really spot on. Now, the only part where we are again, depending whether you want to share that or not, but where we are seeing a slight elevated status in your blood is the bilirubin.
Yeah.
And you're probably familiar with that, and I don't know, you probably also are familiar with that, because we can see in your genes there is a predisposition to the Gilbert syndrome, yeah, which is linked to an elevated bilirubin, yeah. Which to me, actually, I don't know if you've been familiar with that or not.
Well, I from years ago, but there again, it's like data with nothing to do about it. It's like, that obviously we follow specific diet guidelines and stuff like that. But I don't eat for that, right? I mean, I don't know what to do.
Yeah.
Like, I think
Yeah.
it's again, it's the old model. Like I have data with no capacity to really do anything about it.
Yeah, but again, I think that the connection between the two is important, right? So maybe you are well aware and you are well informed, right? But for a lot of people who don't connect the two data, right? So seeing just high level of bilirubin might be worrying, because they might think it's something to do with a kidney failure or something like that, etc. Right? But when you see actually that you have the genes related to the Gilbert syndrome, that is actually really interesting, because again, it's called a syndrome, but looking at longevity, actually it turns out that bilirubin can actually end up being protective, because it's also an antioxidant, right? So in the long run, the data suggests that it actually doesn't have any negative impact on the longevity. If anything, it has potentially some cardioprotective function as well. So with that knowledge, you actually know that there is nothing to worry about, the kind of the, let's say, impaired kidney or whatever. Oh, I've got high bilirubin. It actually says, hey, this is my fundamentals. I'm knowing that, of course, I want to track that through time, that I see stability,
Right.
but also I'm not stressing about it, because I know that that's actually a very particularity of my genetic heritage.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So on the blood analysis is all great. What we're seeing here again on the blood age clocks, we see your blood is sort of in the area of where you are, and that is largely driven by a couple of things. So one part is the cholesterol levels, which again are something that you're familiar with. It can be part of the diet specific, etc. Here's where the science has limitations, and I'll be very honest about that. And we said we'll discuss transparently about all of those things, right?
Yeah.
Because the AI engines that calculate age clocks, right, look at the totality of all the data, right? When you look at the totality of all the data, cholesterol tends to lean into higher risk for cardiovascular, obesity, and so on, lowering the lifespan. And so that does, in any age clock out there, it will drive the biological age higher, right? The way we will try to kind of continuously push on the knowledge of explainability of the biological age clocks is actually to be able to see what is driving that and why. And if we see if the engine can actually learn from your data that those are your kind of fundamental biological, and your physiology is actually taking care that your lipids are actually the types of non-inflammatory lipids, right? It will probably at some point start impacting that biological age to be less impacted by the cholesterol levels. But when you just provide a single snapshot of a biology, right? It would pick up, very high cholesterol that is driving that biology to be potentially slightly older, right? But other than that, the blood age clock is more or less in tune with your physiological age. Yeah. Now, in terms of the microbiome, if we look at the microbiome, the gut microbiome analysis, right? So we're seeing again a really nice diversity. 82% of the gut microbiome of the population. So which means your gut microbiome is way above average, which means you're providing complex foods, high fiber diet. You'll probably do fasting every now and then to clean up the the intestine, etc. So this is really all very healthy, and it's observed through the types of the gut microbiome. Now the only two microbes. So let me see if I can see from the raw data anything. So I cannot see the enterotypes. I don't know if you can see the enterotypes on your dashboard, because I can only see the diversity and the species. But
I
if
see
you
the
see
diversity species. Let's see. How do I go deeper
if
on
you
this?
see the enterotypes,
I'm going into this test. Yeah. Okay. Overview diversity enterotypes. Yeah. It says 99.5% Western food is the first thing it says.
okay.
And then is that all it says in there? I'm not really.
Yeah, so it's interesting, because again, while your diversity is really high, it does suggest that you tend to eat largely, Western style diet, right? So what is really interesting, for example, so again, I don't know what your diet is, but the
Well, we'll talk
the
about
gut
it.
might,
Lean
yeah,
meats and vegetables, mostly low grains. Obviously, I'm doing a lot of the keto stuff, low grains,
yeah,
um,
yeah.
and but a fair amount of nuts and stuff, and very, very large amounts of vegetable consumption, actually.
Yeah. But do you do any types of, fermented stuff or spice related stuff,
Yeah,
and so on? So
eating a lot of spicy foods for sure, and well, spice foods. We do fermenting at home. Don't eat it all. Don't eat
interesting.
fermented foods every day, but we do.
Yeah, so that's interesting. Then what is driving the prevalence of the Western style microbes? This is going to be interesting to explore. So
Yeah,
because normally when you do provide that diversity in terms of fermentation, spice, etc., the gut microbes become even more kind of interesting to observe because they become more let's say broadly populated in terms of uh, um, their style,
yeah,
their metabolism, their function, and so on. Yeah. But anyway, we can take that offline and just explore it a bit further.
yeah.
However, again, just high level understanding is your gut microbiome is really healthy. Your microbiome age is actually 3 years below your your biological age. Diversity is high. The only kind of lack in terms of species is that I'm seeing a relatively low prevalence of bifidobacteria and Blautia. The bifidobacteria are the typical probiotic strains. So
Yeah.
even though they tend to be, kind of relatively prevalent in the kind of the Western population, again, certain types of foods and diets may drive them away. So we might want to repopulate a little bit of that by just eating the right types of yogurts. I'm more of a believer in, live cultures, live yogurts and so on, rather than pills. But, again, pills are good to start if that kicks off. But overall, um, pills don't tend to really have a very long-term effect. They are good for diarrheas when you travel and things like that. But what you want to create is kind of more continuous environment. The Blautia is another interesting one, because Blautia is another species that has been, very strongly correlated with longevity. So when you look at the populations of centenarians or, really kind of, healthy aged, citizens, so, 80, 90 plus, etc. So overall, with age, Blautia really drops down, right? So it's really declining in terms of the prevalence in the gut. Whereas with people who are, living healthy for a very long time, Blautia tends to be a very strong player in there. And what's interesting in terms of its function, it has, a strong contribution to kind of preventing the visceral fat. So it kind of protects you from that, but also provides a significant support in certain types of, kind of gut-brain connection, neurotransmitter pathways, and so on. So a superfood for Blautia, again, I don't know if you do any of that, but it's been shown in several studies now, is raw chocolate. So that's an interesting one.
Actually eating the cacao or
well, or 85+%, pure, nice organic, chocolate. That's been so
that's the
strongly.
best news I've heard all week.
Yeah. So that's an. I mean, you see
Please,
now
Michael, Shaun, eat more chocolate.
a lot of people are doing that, but no, but let's we should really focus on not the milky, sugary, fatty, etc. We're talking really about the high quality, high polyphenol, as unprocessed as possible, etc. Yeah, but that's actually been shown in a number of studies actually to strongly support the population of the Blautia, which is kind of a longevity microbe in your gut. There's a little bit of Clostridium in there, which is driving a little bit of inflammation, the CRP, etc. So that Clostridium is driving, I think, it's contributing. Let me just see, Clostridium. Clostridium Yeah, it contributes like, a 0.7 years to your age. So while you're already, 3 years below your current age, that is kind of a slightly inflammatory species, right? So again, if when you go into your gut microbiome, there's always kind of the lifestyle and diet that will tell you about the particular microbe. If it's causing you harm, there's ways of restricting certain types of dietary intakes to kind of try to limit that for a couple of months, and usually you will be able to get certain bacteria kind of to be pushed out by their competitors in the group.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Anyway, that's kind of going down the microbiomes path. Then when we've looked at your epigenetic age, that was an interesting finding, because that one turns out to be a higher one in your particular case, right? And again, that actually also highlights a little bit in terms of that what is being said today out there in terms of these popular science media is not all 100% correct yet, right? So while epigenome overall is a very, very important marker of how your genetic code is instructed what to express and what not to express, what types of genes are being promoted by which types of cells. It also responds on acute things, on a day-to-day things, etc., right? So what is important again with the epigenome is that we're starting to see trends in that area. So while individual epigenetic scores can vary higher or lower, what new is actually right now doing, and that will be really exciting, and I think it's a feature that is coming within a couple of months, is actually to start really seeing not just the epigenetic age, but really the traits behind that. So really what was the driver of that epigenetic markers that gave a certain age score? Because there's, right now, if you look at most of the, well-known age clocks, like, Horvath or Hannum or what, those are just numbers, right? What we want to know is what areas of the genome have been affected by the epigenetic alterations, whether that is linking to inflammation, to your circadian rhythm, to your sleep pattern, to maybe a liver detox or any other areas that are going to be showing us both in terms of, is this something that is a chronic situation and it's really accumulating through time, or has that been maybe an acute expression of those particular cells that in the next iteration actually that part of the epigenome has been reversing, right?
And I'm thinking we just come back when we got the blood test from 2 weeks on the road to Brazil and Mexico, and there's a lot of environmental stresses. I don't find it stressful traveling, of course, going to conferences and talking and things like that. But I'm curious, and this is what's part of the promise of news. I'm curious now to maybe next quarter in the winter to do another test and see, okay, where are we at
absolutely
now? And what does that look like, and how does that change and alter? And then we know that if it's like it was circumstantial, or we know that it's kind of something ongoing, which is again, no data that I could have had my hands on before. In that epigenetic score, then where is the Telomer link data? Is that something that's in there right now, not apparent to me, or how do we actually know that? And how do I interpret that if I had that data anyway?
Yeah, so the telomeres are a tricky one, right? Because again, there's been so much spoken about the telomeres, but the reality is, we've done a huge amount of work on the telomeres, and the reality is, while we thought the telomeres are kind of a one-way street, in terms of shortening, the reality is the telomeres are all over the place. They're so, they're continuously activated, deactivated, the telomerases, lengthening, shortening in different tissues, different organs, and so on. So in reality, if you wanted to really build a strong telomere, clock, you would actually have to sample across different tissues, and actually a very, very repetitively. Yeah. So we find that just a simple telomere analysis from, let's say, a saliva sample or even a blood sample does not really strongly correlate with either age or health risk, right? So that's actually a tricky one, because then a shorter telomere length doesn't really tell you that you're either older or more predisposed to risk. It's actually a much more so. I would
And
say that
I did some. I've been an endurance
telomere
athlete.
sciences have still a lot to evolve, right?
Yeah.
In order to do, yeah.
I've been an endurance athlete on and off my whole life, and I started doing some research into like, well, does that impact telomere length? Well, it turns out that it influences it both ways. If you do a lot of endurance type sports, to up to a certain point, it'll support the lengthening of the telomeres. But in like very, very top level athletes, you get the opposite. When you start having people that are putting their body constantly into deficit, you actually find those people having. So I think that like when I first read one article, I'm like, okay, this is it. And then I read another article, I'm like, oh no, this is not it. This isn't it. It's a depending upon the circumstances. There isn't just one thing that's good for this part of your body. And I think that's something that's
yeah. And if you look at different organs, you will have different cells have different lengths of telomeres. And if you resample, repetitively in different, time periods, etc., they will be all over the place. So it's really not as solid as that yet. Yeah, the kind of the statements. I mean, there is a generalistic, let's say, understanding and some evidence that things like fasting, things like cold exposure and so on can induce the telomerase, right? Because again, the telomerase has that evolutionary story that it helps the species to survive. So if the species goes through a lengthy winter period of starvation and cold and so on, a lot of the tribe members will die. So what you want to trigger is, some degree of promoting the longevity of at least part of the tribe, so that when, some of those survive at the end, they can, repopulate the tribe and keep on going, right? And that's also kind of an interesting evolutionary mechanism why we see huge jump in stem cell production when we come from that let's say even a short-term fasting period, because again it stimulates the idea we've been starving through the winter, we're now bone and skin,
right.
And yet at the end of that winter we need to go out and hunt the rabbit and hunt the deer, but at the same time there's a bear or a cave lion and so on the hunt for us, right? So we need to both be the predator and avoid being the prey, right? So we need to rebuild the muscle, make the strong bones. So there's a lot of evolutionary functions that do support a lot of these things. But telomeres, in terms of just as the age clocks, I think that there's still some time, some space for us to properly develop knowledge to be, solidly backing it. I would not say it's as evolved as the epigenetic yet.
Yeah, and we know that
honesty.
there's a lot of people talking about different ways to increase telomere length, either by lifestyle practices like you mentioned, or supplements and things like that, and it's completely without any real evidence. no longitudinal studies at this point in any of that. And now we're hitting tons of stuff about peptides because of Genomic and all the sugar transport controls and all that stuff. And again, I think it's a real Wild West moment for a lot of these things. And we've got people out there taking some of these drugs that maybe they're not necessary for them in their time of life, but they're doing them in hope of getting longevity of that. And I think doing that without something like new that will let you know whether that activity is producing any beneficial results seems, well, just blind faith, if nothing else. I mean, I'm hoping that we can graduate to this point where we actually can get data and then make either dietary or supplementation choices, or maybe take on a peptide or something like that might affect us some way, kind of a larger reset, and then find out in 2 or 3 months if it worked, versus what we're doing right now is we're just trying a bunch of stuff and not knowing if it's working, and actually not even knowing if we might be causing harm while we're attempting to do good.
Yeah, so then if we go from blood, micro, epi, and so on to eventually to your genes, right? So on that front, I'm just realizing, and again, something that would be really nice to do, but that would be probably for a different type of podcast, because you would need to screen share. Like I said earlier, I can only see the raw data, so I cannot actually see your digital twin. Okay. The beauty of what we created with New is really, this concept of digital twin, where you dive into your cardiovascular system, you dive into your brain, and you see your mood or anxiety, or you go into your liver, and then you see the areas and you may show that later on in the overlay, but you see areas where the entire all the genes affecting a certain type of liver health or cardiovascular health are coming out, and then the gut microbes affecting the same, and the bloods and so on, and the totality of the story. And then there's the know yourself part that you learn about all this stuff, but there's also the change yourself, like all the hacks, all the foods, recommendations, lifestyle activities and so on, related to your cardiovascular health or related to your mood or related to your anxiety and so on, right? So really the idea of that digital twin is that becomes your interface with your biology, with your body, right?
I just realized I can share it on my screen. Would it be worth just taking a look at it right now to share the screen, just so everybody can see what it looks like? Okay, so here we have the digital twin, and this is what you're talking about. This is the kind of cool animation of my digital twin. I'm taking that's just an animation. Now we should be looking at these things here, right?
Yeah, no, but the animation actually is simulating what is coming, right? Because the way we're building the digital twin is really, it's going to be an interactive, interface where you're zooming in and out of your body, and every dot that you see there on the animation is actually a piece of data.
Oh,
so
wow.
You really are comprised of hundreds of thousands of data points. You're zooming in and out of your body, and you're seeing how data is coming alive in front of you. Yeah? So almost like a metaverse style interaction with yourself. So,
right.
but here, I mean, we've talked about, the blood, the genes and so on. We haven't actually talked about the genes yet. So, there we can, jump into that very quickly if you want, but now we can actually also go into your digital twin if you prefer. So for example, since we've already done a deep dive in terms of the bloods and the microbes, maybe let's just do one quick look into how we're actually interpreting the blood, right? So let's click into one blood biomarker, down in the tests.
That one here, yeah.
The tests, yeah. So for example, here, maybe you can just click on the first one, the alanine transaminase, for example, right? Or so here it will tell you. So this is, let's say, alkaline phosphatase, yeah. Here you would see the gray area is what would be a typical reference range from a path lab, right?
Yeah.
But the green area is actually what the optimal results are for a person of your sex, age, and ethnicity, right? So it really is about, we want to get markers into an optimal stage rather than just being reference and not disease, right? So if you go down, you always see the explanation in terms of this is what we know about this marker. There's literature behind that, and there's always going to be some kind of lifestyle and diet that will talk about this particular biomarker, what is affecting it, right? So when you're clicking on those, you're learning more. If you go out, maybe back. So just click on the alkaline phosphatase. There's alkaline phosphatase. No, just.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Okay, you got it.
You go back out. Go one below, because that one is, like, for example, in the reference. Yeah. So here you will see that one you were in the optimal area. Here you're still okayish, but you're no longer optimal, for example, right? So you can again read about it. You go down, you learn about the all the science behind it. You can click on literature, but when you go further down the lifestyle and diet, you can learn about what types of activities are affecting this particular biomarker, right? So you can be learning about this level of detail when you go through this story. So if you go up, so every biomarker will be showing you these different aspects of what is known as a reference, what is known as an optimal, what's your data, and then with more data that you provide, you will start seeing trends. And so if we go out, we can see also in terms of trends, you will be seeing in groups. So up there you have groups. You can see about the liver, the kidney, their hormones, and so on. So again, here you can click on any one of these, like HbA1c or whatever. You'll be seeing the same kind of data. So it's a really really detailed data. You learn all about the biomarkers. You learn about what's the optimal range, and where you are out of in that range, and what you can do about that, right?
Yeah. And we had talked about the bilirubin before, cholesterol before. Yeah.
Okay, so if we go maybe to your genes, to your genome.
Where is that? It's right here. Okay, great.
This one, yes. So this one will be kind of similarly structured. You can look at different areas on the left. You can be focusing on different functions like liver, kidney, inflammation, and so on. You can be learning about different aspects of it, like areas to focus on, areas. As you can see, there is no red genes. In our interpretation, there's things that are really your strengths, that are things that are sort of neutral, as they should be. And then there are genes that maybe you should pay some attention to. They're your focus genes. They're areas that you should be aware of. And there's a huge number of these. So maybe if we go up and we just say just select genes with the focus group, right?
Yeah. There's this
so we can go up, we can go all the way to the top. We can say not any area, we can say any effect. In there, say focus, right?
Focus. Okay, great.
Okay. Just give me these guys, right? Just give me the ones that I should learn more about them, right? So here, when I'm kind of scrolling through these guys, and I've done a quick review before of that, for example. So a lot of these are again, we can learn about these, etc. But what I've learned, quickly reviewing, so to shorten the time of that, of course, you'll be seeing a number of these FTOs and so on. But for example, these MTHFR, that's an important one in the folate metabolism, right?
This one here, yeah.
Yeah. So if you click on that one, it will tell you all about, so this guy is, so first, you scroll down, you learn about, what it does in the lifestyle and diet below, right? The reason why I'm pointing him is, even though this one is just partially affected, so you have an AG genotype, which means you got one version from your dad, one version from your mom, so it's just partially affected. But it's one of those that I mentioned to you earlier in that folate pathway, right? That is a precursor to your choline synthesis, your hormone, synthesis, etc. Including the kind of the dopamine, the serotonin, the melatonin, and the overall kind of methylation pathways. Now, this is just one, but if we zoom out, the reason why I'm pointing it, there's several others. So there's MTHFD1, then there's the BHMY, and so on, BHMT. All of these are kind of playing, their part in the same story.
Yeah.
And so what we're, a next iteration of the dashboard interface will actually be combining not just a single genes, but the totality of pathways, like how one pathway is affected, how another pathway is affected, etc. Now we can be focusing them on areas, like area over on the left side, but later we'll even go all the way down to the pathway level. But what I'm learning from here is, for example, when you do click through those genes, is that, for example, you have a certain, to some degree, let's say, a reduced, ability in your, folate pathway, elevating your homocysteine levels, and kind of lowering your ability to, synthesize choline, synthesize, some of these areas. So with that said, that's kind of one important learning from the genetic that you will see in your recommendations and in your supplements as well on the top, right? So it will be coming with the recommendations of, supplementing not with a vitamin B9, but with methyl tetrahydrofolate. So with an activated form of the B9, it will be suggesting, what you already are doing, a vitamin B12 supplementation, a zinc, and a calcium supplementation, and so on, because those are important pathway parts of this pathway. And it will suggest, dietary intake of choline, right? And choline you can either get again as a supplement, or you can get through, eggs, etc., etc. So let's see if it's connecting. Let's click the PQQ. Here you will be able to see how supplements are linked by their, benefits or the hallmarks, the way, what you would be getting. Why is it good for me? When you click on it, it will show you all the sciences.
Right.
So for example, if you click on it, it should open, you should see all the science behind it. Why is this, relevant for me, with all the papers, etc. How they affect aging, right? And again, with all the sciences behind that, right? Everything that, how is it about, and so on. But let's just click on the PGC1 alpha, right? Let's click on the gene below.
Okay.
So for example, pathways involved.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Okay, so you see that, for example, this PGC1 alpha, okay, so if I read about it, it's basically it's slightly slightly impaired. It means it's got one copy that is less active and one copy that is normally active, right?
Yeah.
And when you look at the lifestyle and diet, it will probably recommend supplement with PQQ. So for example, PGC1 alpha is a gene related to mitochondrial biogenesis, right? So for example, this guy coordinates how your mitochondria replicate based on the need of the cell, right? So this is like the coordinator or the conductor of that process. So, this, your gene is okay, but it's, maybe suboptimal, right? So it's just, suggesting that you can be supplementing with a small amount of PGC1 alpha, for example, right? But again, let's now go. So here you see all different types of supplements. Each one has that level of data in terms of the science behind it, the rationale, the papers published, etc. And of course, it does show like some nice pictures, where a natural source of that supplement would be. But of course, when you take pills, those are usually extracts from that area. But let's go back to the dashboard. Let's go through one story of the digital twin just to show you kind of how that looks like. So, for example, when you look into your kind of digital twin, we can maybe go into a cardiovascular area. So again, just think about these areas. This is no longer. I mean, this is currently we're clicking through.
Yeah.
But very soon you will be just zooming in and out of your body, and that kind of you can think about it as a multi-layered onion approach. The deeper dive we go, the deeper we go into yourself, the more granulated the data becomes, the more particular and relevant to that space. But the higher we go, the more summarizable it will become, right? So what we're going to now be bringing to the dashboard is that even the front page will actually have immediate, like, these are your kind of most important things to do, and so on and so forth. But now if you go, for example, into your vascular health, let's go further into your vascular health, right? So we're starting to see these different types of genes coming through and telling you, these are the genes affecting your, let's say, vascular health.
Yeah.
I can further click on a particular gene, or I can just be reading about the summary at the bottom, right? So this is what's happening to your endothelial cells. This is what's happening to inflammation, lipids, and so on. So I can click on each one and it will give me explanation of that stuff, right? So I can further go down to my gene level if I want. But let's for the sake of, and it will be showing me again. I mean, if you want to click, you can click on ApoC1 or something like that. Click on it once more, and it will take you to your gene, right? And then it will show you again the data about it, the science behind it, and lifestyle and diet, what you can do. Let's go out. Yeah. Okay. So we see which blood items are affecting your vascular health, right? So, and again, I can be reading what from my blood is impacting my different areas. So I can zoom down. I can learn about, again, the summaries, like what is affecting my sugars, my inflammation, my lipids, and so on. I can be clicking through those. Or I can be clicking on individual blood biomarkers, again, on what they do. And then finally, we can go to gut microbiome. Again, each one of these is clickable, right? It can go all the way to the end, right? But I'm just, for the sake of time, we're trying to keep it high level.
Yeah.
And again, here you can go further down. These are your gut microbes affecting your health, your vascular. We're still in the vascular health, right? This is all down in the blood vessels.
Yeah.
What you will see in the next iteration of the dashboard is actually, instead of clicking through them, they will all come together as these bigger chunks of bubbles or data points, right?
Yeah.
And the size of these will show you, for you, your genes are the most highly affecting you. Your blood is really healthy, but it doesn't play such a significant role. But your microbiome, there's only a few species, but they're really causing havoc, right?
Yeah.
So in the next iteration, you will actually be able to see how much of those are contributing, because right now you need to still click the three tabs. But later you will actually visualize that, because they will actually display to you their overall impact, right? We go up. If we go up, then what you see here, because you haven't filled your questionnaires, there is a change yourself.
It's okay. So I have to work on my questionnaire.
You have to do your question, because otherwise in your program, I've only been learning about my vascular health now, and maybe some details about how I can actually nurture a gene or nurture a gut microbe, right?
Yeah.
But actually, what is often for most people, this is too overwhelming, right?
Yeah.
So what you say is, hey, just tell me about, what should I eat? How should I exercise for my blood vessels? And this is what this tab is all about. It will tell you everything about your diets, your activities, and your lifestyle that you should be focusing on for your vascular health. And then when you go out and you go into your brain and you go into your mood or anxiety, you will see completely different recommendations, right? Because those will be focusing. And so at a high level, then you say, hey, but that gets complicated, because now I have to take care of my liver, and then I have to take care of you already know what's important, right? But at the same time, we will guide you through that. So in the dashboard, you will be able to see in the next iteration, like these are really your red flags. Like you should focus on these first, get that in order, and then you can do the rest, right? But when you go into program instead, and again, now it will be empty because you didn't fill in your questionnaires.
Yeah.
But otherwise, when you go into program, that high-level summary for your totality of Michael Shaun will be there, right? So that will actually tell you, like, overall, if everything is too overwhelming, you just want to say, hey, give me my top foods, my top activities, and my top life hacks, that it's going to be there, right?
Yeah.
If I want to really focus, because I know right now it's all about my liver or all about my anxiety, right? Then you have more specific recommendations when you dive deeper in that area, right?
Great, and I'll work on those after we get off the call. I'll retake that questionnaire for sure. Well, this has been really insightful to be able to just see how these things go together, and I'm also just really excited to hear about some of the new things that are coming up. I want to point out a really major difference between what we've been doing here and talking about here is that you get both these kind of generalized suggestions and then the really deep things underneath it. And I think this is a very big breakthrough for these kinds of testing platforms and stuff like that. And I think I'm also just curious, like where this is heading a little bit more. We can talk about that next, but I just want to say, first of all, I'm excited by everything that we've done and everything we've seen, and the whole process leads me to believe that we're at the beginning of something really, really important for people's health. I mean, just the thing like you said about it's not just the bilirubin being high, it's also the genetic predisposition, and it actually may not be bad. Those two pieces of data, just those two pieces of data alone, may actually have me treat my health entirely differently. And my doctor just basically seeing a blood panel, which is about all they've ever looked at anyway, if they've even looked at that, don't really get any of that information. And so they're kind of flying blind as well. And obviously in medical school, we're not trained on this kind of data. You'd have to be a new medical student now to even have the idea that this could be the way we take care of ourselves, which leads me to believe, or leads me to ask, like, what will we be looking at 5 years from now? Let's say 5 years, New has been really perfecting this and really helping people to see these things. How does that begin to affect what we consider healthcare these days? Or is there a new way that we actually might be able to functionally deal with our bodies differently once we actually have this data, especially for myself 5 years from now, if I've continued this work with New and kind of tracked this stuff longitudinally? Where will I be? Where we all be? Where will medicine be, or healthcare be in that new place?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. Yeah, so here we are now talking about two, I would say two overarching words. One is health span, and the other one is lifespan.
Okay.
Right? And so the first one that we are addressing with this platform is the health span. So what we want to achieve, and let's say if we put ourselves 5 years into the future, I mean, what you saw today is the first release of an engine that looks at the totality of data, right? And it's still, it honestly, it's I think it's super exciting, but it is still challenging to understand, right? So we're working hard day and day to make that simpler, easier, and so on. But what we wanted to create was an engine that is built on science. So what is really important is that once you get to the bottom of any type of data or information, there's all the scientific evidence behind that. So there's no, BS around, the stuff that is coming through, right? It's
Right.
all like, what's the latest in terms of the scientific evidence? Now, what we're doing now is bringing that, easier and easier to understand and easier to interact, right? And with the AI explosion that is now happening with, kind of large language models and so on, what an AI, what a GPT currently will not be able to, decode is, your genes and your microbes and connect that together, right? So that really requires a whole different types of algorithms and models and so on. But, a language model can then pick up these prompts that you've now seen deep diving and actually talk to you as your either physician or a coach or a friend, right? And if I know that, if you're a 35-year-old mother of two with a a growing ambitious career, or you're a 65-year-old grandfather just retired and so on. One is I don't know, an architect or a lawyer. The other one is maybe even a retired professor. The language model will be able to interact with you on the same level of understanding and excitement as you are, right? So you can say, hey, I feel fatigued today, something is, how can I, have more energy, or what is driving my, whatever. That engine will actually know all of your biology, but will also know all of your wearables data, your physiology, and the way your body has been responding to your diets, your stress, your environment, related to your gut microbes, related to your genes, and so on. And it will really be able to guide you through that health optimization process. Where we want to get is with this continuous tracking, that it becomes as non-invasive as possible. So kind of it's as unburdening to you as possible, but at the same time you always have that health coach, health guide, in your pocket with you, so that at some point when something does go offline, does go off, in the wrong direction, it's an immediate red flag. Immediate, hey, your stress levels are going up, your HRV is dropping, maybe because of this, your inflammation is increasing, etc. Right? Whatever happens in life, your gut microbiome is changing, etc. You take a preventive action way ahead of time before you actually start getting into space of disease, right? So what we want to prevent is this, onset of chronic disease, illness, decline, and so on, right? So I think that the first stage of where we get in 5 years is that people really start living this, informed way of healthy life, where they are informed by the actual data of how their body responds, rather than by what the latest trend in nutrition, or whatever newspaper mentioned, etc. Right? So they actually see the evidence, and with that digital twin interface, that's a body of evidence accumulated through years and years of data, right? So you really know how your body responds, and you're catching any, let's say, unhealthy trends way ahead of time. You're optimizing your biology, you're optimizing your hormones, your energy levels, your muscle recovery, and so on, right? And with that, we're kind of setting ourselves for the next cycle of the longevity, right? Where really the exciting stuff kicks in, right? Because again, why now? A lot of people are asking why now, right? It's because today we have this ability to measure. The data is actually finally becoming available and affordable to everyone. The power of computing with machine learning and AI and these types of complex processing is finally allowing us to actually see the totality of it. And by starting to track it now, we can see any trends, how they evolve through time, so we catch them properly, and we start optimizing our biology today at any time in life, right? So even for a young athlete, you want to make sure your peak recovery, peak nutrition, peak performance is based on your biology, not on what the general recommendations and guidelines are. Because we see even Olympic athletes, some of them, respond phenomenally to certain types of diets, but they don't, some others don't, because their, gut microbiome is different. Yeah. So, and then, like I said, this puts us in a great position that with an optimal shape in health and preventive that chronic illness, we're catching the trends of this regenerative medicine that is also now being developed at an incredibly rapid pace, right? Yeah. But even the regenerative medicine, where we're thinking about, not just the stem cells and the CRISPRs and the 3D organ printings and all these other crazy stuff. This is all in the labs now happening already, kind of, this is not even decades away, right? But all of that will be personalized and precision driven, right? You can't just apply any type of this very, very hallmark specific intervention in a generic one size fits all approach. You will really need to know your data. You will need to own your biology, right? And so in a way, we're kind of creating the vehicle for you to start really optimizing this in one single vehicle that we have in life, to keep on kind of nurturing it in the optimal shape for, all the, not just today's technologies, but also for the future technologies to be able to apply to you.
Yeah, like I've been working with functional medicine doctors and longevity and reading a bunch. I've kind of consider myself like to a small degree knowledgeable about the area, and I still treat my body like everybody else's body. I follow dietary recommendations, not based upon my own biology, but just upon what I read and what seems to make sense and where I want to go with my health and my longevity. But I mean, it's quite possible I'm not doing the right things. I know that very clearly, especially in going through some of our data. It's like, wow, I actually have an opportunity to make my health better based on my body. And then the other thing that kind of goes up, I've been with my wife for 30, it'll be 30 years in December. We've been together, and we eat the same food, but we have different bodies. And,
Yeah.
And we do very similar exercise, and we do very similar things. And that's probably worked out okay, because in general, we've been in a healthy range. But looking forward into the future, like I think it'd be great for us to diverge. So maybe there's some dishes on the table that are just for me and some that are just for her. That could be really a real breakthrough. And that there's not a one size fits all. We've known this for a long time, but there's not a one size fits all. That's saying it is one thing, but actually knowing what fits you is a completely different thing and a completely different proposal.
I agree 100%. I mean, look, it was again the same story with me and my wife. Same thing. We've been together, for 25 plus years. An amazing journey. But again, we have, we live same environment, same food, same lifestyle, same everything, but very different genetics.
Right.
Healthy genetics overall, but on minute details, small pathways just significantly divergent. So our let's say supplements in terms of the vitamin mineral support, the certain types of polyphenols we need to provide ourselves to nurture, very different in terms of food sensitivities, and again, it doesn't come from allergy tests, but even it comes from these small diets that we're not talking about allergic, right? You know what you're allergic to, but it's about the stuff that you're unaware that you eat and digest. You on the tongue, it feels, oh my God, what a fantastic meal! I'm loving it, right? But it's causing this tiny chronic inflammation. You feel bloated. It's just something that is stressing your body, and you're just not knowing what is causing it. It turns out there's just a couple of elements in your diet. My wife eliminates X, Y, and Z, and I eliminate ABC, and it's different. It's not this. It really isn't the same. And once you do that, and you see how that converges in the kids, where some actually get a combination, some actually get just the opposite stuff, right? You can start creating a family kind of meal planning almost out of it, right? But it's so amazing because it really helps you, helps your brain and your body to just really always feel energized and at its best, right? It doesn't have that unease of bloatiness and so on, but also you see it in the biomarkers, because what is the major drive of especially the cognitive but also cardiovascular aging is the chronic inflammation, right? We even call it inflammaging, right?
Yeah.
So catching that stuff that you're not even aware, like we're not talking about acute inflammation from a bacterial disease or something, right? We're talking about that low level that is just persistently irritating, right? That's what we want to avoid. Yeah.
And then the last thing I want to mention, because I haven't done anything with it myself, but New provides supplements. Is that a custom supplementation based upon what you've learned through my testing? Is that those supplements are, the supplements are generalized supplements?
Yeah, exactly. So those would be specifically tailored to you, right? So indeed, every single person, the way we approach currently, but again, this is going to be an evolutionary process. Right now, the supplements that we do are really kind of the Formula One or the Bentley of the let's say longevity approach to supplementation, right? So we really look into the depth of what we first want to make sure to drive that mitochondrial growth, get rid of the cellular senescence, provide the right type of DNA repair, cell stability, all these kind of things, energy metabolism, and then kind of recycling processes in your kind of nightly sleep, nightly rhythm, etc. So there's a certain baseline that all cells require, but then on top of that, for example, there are certain types of vitamins that for her would actually be toxic, whereas for you they would actually be quite okay, right? So once you get the baseline done, which is really kind of the fundamental cell biology, and then that's where kind of a lot of the core expenses are. What you really want to make sure is that you provide that nurture to those. We were talking about the folate, the neurotransmitter pathways. There are certain areas in terms of kind of both the lipid metabolism, the vitamin and mineral metabolism, etc. So all of those then get fine-tuned and adjusted based on your current state. So what we are looking at is both supporting your gene function, right? Yeah. So that those are properly stimulated, not overstimulated, not understimulated. Then we provide the right type of environment for the gut microbiome so that they have the right type of interaction with the epithelial cells and so on. And then of course we want to address any types of imbalance or kind of insufficiency in your blood, right? So whether there is something that is too high or too low, etc., right? So those get tweaked as well. What we will be doing in the future is, of course, providing even greater kind of product ranges and price elasticity. So while right now we go for that, mitochondria, cell senescence, genome stability, all this kind of stuff with all the kind of very, very, complex, molecules. What we want to make sure is that we also can bring that down to, the affordability level to just about anyone, right? So even now, I think that, the pricing is really, I mean, you see your supplement that are coming out of the system. You go on Amazon, you would be paying like $500-$600 for that, right? So we still, so we're still half the price of that, and it's still, I'm aware it's not cheap, but I think it really works, right? I mean, we've seen that it really works on a lot of people. But we are still working on making the products even more affordable, even more, more accessible.
Well, that's what we want. We don't just want the data or the nice interface. We actually want to make a difference in our life or make a difference in our health. So I think that's something you guys are offering. I mean, it's not required, of course, but I think anybody would want to then take the next step and say, hey, what happens if I supplement against, at least for 6 months or so, to see what happens, retest again and see how things change.
Exactly. And I think that that's the idea. And again, to your point, right? So, everybody who's on the program and, they kind of retest, with every retesting, the formula may change, right? Because again, we may see that something was really kind of, high, inflammatory, or, your lipid was in complete dysregulation and so on. Now we've actually been able to kind of normalize and stabilize that, right? Now your gut microbiome has improved and so on. So we can start really addressing all the other, aspects of your biology. So it's really continuously adapting and evolving types of formulation.
Yeah, and I think, and then inside the program, obviously there's some foods you recommend we eat. I mean, how's that going to evolve? Are we going to evolve to even more specific kinds of diet planning and stuff like that become available?
That's the idea. Yeah, that's the idea that, ultimately we want to create an ecosystem, right? So on one hand side, you have all the recommendations in terms of your supplements on your app, right? Yep. We're not locking you in, right? So if you want, you walk into a Holland & Barrett, or you go online to Amazon, you can buy all the stuff. But you can also get it from us. It's going to be convenient, right? Yeah. And quality control, really, top ingredients, etc. The same is elsewhere. We're with the food engine we created, I think we've probably created the world's most advanced food engine that's on the planet today. So it's really, it goes down to biochemistry of every single thing. We're not like, what is known in the literature about broccoli and your, gut microbes. It's actually, what is the biochemistry of that broccoli, and how are the kind of chemical compositions based on your typical, dietary intake of that, broccoli chunk, correlating with the blood biochemistry, with the microbiome biochemistry, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah? So with that, we can actually calculate very precisely all types of meals that you might be thinking about, right? So while today the engine goes to the degree of saying, hey, these foods are great for you and for such and such, and here's all the science, in the very near term iteration, you will be able to actually say, like, I'm liking these meal plans. I'm like, but I'm a vegetarian. I want to choose this out, etc. And you can be creating the whole meal plan and shopping list for, etc. And then again, you can plug that into your, food supplier, your food delivery or whatever, or you can go, create your shopping list. So again, what we'll try to create is a platform that is as usable to the end consumer as possible, that it drives that value of I'm doing stuff that is really relevant for myself, right? And if I want to really then take into consideration the rest of my family, well, for my wife, I exclude this, for my son, I add this, and so on. So all of a sudden I get a really very precise, approach to what is really data driven. And again, then, by connecting some of us that are, the geeks beyond geeks, that have the glucose monitors, that have all the wearables, right? You take that meal plan and you see the actual results, you see the impact on your glucose, you see the impact on your nightly, sleep and recovery, etc. Right? I mean, for me, it's just a fistful of pistachios. They have a whole bunch of melatonin in there, right? I mean, just if you need to snack, right, that's the best snack that you have for your night pattern, right? So again, these are just small, easy things, right?
Well, I'm really excited about New. I was excited from the first time. I don't know how I stumbled across it. It might have been an email, probably not, but something, pretty close in the early stages of your life cycle. I've looked at and experimented with some of the other things that are out there. This is the most complete solution that I've seen. I'm super happy that it's in Europe, for those of us who are Europe-based, to actually have this happening in this kind of breakthrough technological precision medicine approach being there. Also functional medicine, I want to say, is what we're talking about in a lot of ways. And I'm excited to see where we go from here. I'm excited to help you guys in your journey and giving you some user feedback about what we're experiencing. But thus far, we think that you have the most amazing thing going right now. We're really, really excited to see what the future is, not only for ourselves, but for all of humanity. We have the opportunity now to begin to have this precision medicine delivered, or maybe even that, like precision lifestyle, like how to eat and behave according to our specific bodies and needs. And that will lead us all, I think, to much healthier and happier lives. So thank you for all the hard work. Thank your team. I know there's lots of people behind you guys and things you're doing. And we're really excited to continue the conversation.
No, exciting. No, glad to be interacting, and always happy to jump on a call like that and dive deep into biology. So I think it's super exciting where the journey is going, but also, talking to guys like you who are, really knowledgeable about the field is really super. It's really great for us to get, feedback in terms of what works, what doesn't, because we want to really make sure that we develop, a platform that is, fun, exciting, brings the beauty of human body, the human biology to everyone, democratizes this, myth of complexity, but also it stays true to the, to the science, right? It really stays true to what we do know, what we don't know, where's the newest evidence, and so on, right? So even with that, we try to bring that continuous, insights as part of that, regular engagement with the end consumer, because we bring the excitement of scientific discoveries and of yourself, hopefully indigestible information, right? And then make it fun.
The Boldly Now Show, igniting the world of burning desire, big ideas, and bold action.
Boldly Now is an initiative of the Generative Futures Initiative, generating a thriving future for humanity.